Let's talk about culture because you mentioned that there for a second. And I want to read an excerpt from the article. Some of the traits that make the American restaurant industry what it is: shouting matches in the kitchen, gossiping about coworkers at the service station, late night tequila shots in the middle of the week with the person who you gossiped about because there's no one else who will drink with you, often facilitate an environment that correlates to mental health issues for many workers. Some stereotypes, like the bartender who drinks too much or the chef who often loses his temper, seem so ingrained into the industry that it's hard to imagine a restaurant without them. So what that's saying to me is this is the culture. The drug abuse, the toxic relationships, talking about somebody and then having to drink with them because you don't have any other friends.
Right.
This is I had no idea that it was this bad. Thank you for joining us, everyone. I'm Lindsay Ruffin, cooking show advisor and owner of Park Road Studios, where we make cooking shows easy. My guest today is Marsha Evans, owner of Willow Tree Counseling and Education Center and licensed professional counselor. Marsha is a therapist, and today we're going to talk about mental health in the hospitality industry. I saw an article a few days ago that was quite disturbing and quite eye opening for me about the prevalence of the mental health challenges in the hospitality industry. And many of those challenges are driven by drug and alcohol abuse. And that's what we're going to talk about today with Marsha. Thank you for joining us, Marsha.
Yes, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to talking about this topic. When I read the article, it was really heavy, and I really felt just bad and like just sad to like hear these stories. It's almost like it's a population of people that have gone unrecognized.
Yeah, so let me, and I will put a link in the description box of this video to the article that we're talking about. And I'll just read kind of the summary of it. Basically, a 2015 study by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Service Administration ranks the restaurant industry highest among 19 industries for illicit drug use and third highest for heavy alcohol consumption. So let me put that into context a bit. The other, so in the top three, if we look at just uh, alcohol use, past month heavy alcohol use among adults aged 18 to 64 employed full time, the worst industry is the mining industry with 17.5% past 17.5% of employees with past month heavy alcohol use. Second is construction with 16.5% employees. And third is the hospitality or accommodations and food services, hospitality industry at 11.8%. So, in terms of the worst industries, there's mining, construction, and then the hospitality industry. And this is for heavy alcohol use. If we look at specifically past month illicit drug use among that same group, adults aged 18 to 64, full-time employees, the hospitality industry is number one, the absolute worst at 19% of staff or employees engaging in illicit drug use in the past month. This was eye opening for me, Marsha. I knew, you see the stories on TV and the shows and such where they're talking about, a lot of drinking and partying and such, but I didn't have any idea that it was this bad.
Right. Yeah, no, and it's interesting, we were just talking about like culinary school or thinking about people who go to school for bartending. I'm just wondering if that's something they even speak about. Um, or are they just trying to get people in the doors, in the seats, and then out? But it's substance abuse is no joke. And I think it's also, around mental health. A lot of times people who suffer from substance abuse also they have co-occurring mental health disorders. So there might be anxiety, depression, but it was really sad to like read those numbers. But when we think about that industry, um, it's like they got to do what they got to do to make money and to feed their families, and it's almost like they're constantly in a survival space. It's constantly a battle, constantly making sure that they make this money and they do what they need to do, and they're in a hostile, sometimes hostile environment.
I wonder like you said, I wonder if they're actually having these conversations, because when I look at these culinary schools and you see these waves of graduates that come out every time there's a graduation, I wonder if this is like though they're not taught business skills. So when you come out of culinary school, you're not taught how to actually be successful running a restaurant or how to run a catering business. You've been taught how to cook. You have to actually learn business still, even though you just graduated with a culinary degree. You have to learn the business of food. And I wonder if this is something that is just like that. There's all these hazards of the industry, occupational hazards, the rampant drug and alcohol problem. I wonder if this is being discussed at all in these culinary schools, with providing individuals at least some insight about what's coming ahead and how to address it or potentially avoid it. I suspect that it's not, because it's not an easy topic to address.
Right.
And I just don't see all these folks that they work so hard to get their chef coat and now go off to pursue their career. I don't see them eagerly setting out on a path of drug and alcohol abuse, but the data clearly shows that that's where a lot of folks end up, because this is what the industry is doing.
Right. And as you were talking, I'm wondering, right, if we think about the restaurants and the environment, I'm wondering if it's like if they can start putting it in their handbook and their training, like monthly training. How do we recognize signs if you're starting to indulge in a substance abuse, substance? How can we make this a norm, right? How can we set the tone for like wellness? What does that look like? How can we catch it before it happens, before it's be preventative instead of having it into crisis? Because ultimately you're impacting families and lives, and people, they interact with so many people. And so I'm just wondering, can it might not happen in the schools, which I think it should, right? But how can it happen in the establishment? How can you make sure monthly, or you can do something weekly, but you really start including that within the culture? Because with the numbers being so high, that means that they need help. And I think in the study, it was like there, I think whenever the study happened, it said that it still wasn't, they weren't doing anything about it. The numbers hadn't gone down. So it's an issue that has not really truly been addressed.
Let's talk about culture, because you mentioned that there for a second, and I want to read an excerpt from the article. Some of the traits that make the American restaurant industry what it is: shouting matches in the kitchen, gossiping about coworkers at the service station, late night tequila shots in the middle of the week with the person who you gossiped about because there's no one else who will drink with you, often facilitate an environment that correlates to mental health issues for many workers. Some stereotypes, like the bartender who drinks too much or the chef who often loses his temper, seem so ingrained into the industry that it's hard to imagine a restaurant without them. So what that's saying to me is this is the culture. The drug abuse, the toxic relationships, talking about somebody and then having to drink with them because you don't have any other friends.
Right.
This is I had no idea that it was this bad. Um what can a chef do? How can, because I've talked to chefs who have spoken about the ills of the industry. Mainly what they were talking about was the angry chef screaming and yelling at people, just flying off the handle for stuff and being abusive verbally, and in some instances physically. Uh, I've talked to chefs who wanted to teach people another way. They wanted to lead people another way. What How does somebody who came up in that system, a chef who came up in that system and now is in a position where they actually are leading a restaurant, maybe even
Hmm.
a restaurant group, and they don't want to be that guy, that evil screaming toxic chef, but that's all they knew, that's what they were taught, and they have it in them to be that, and they're trying not to, but they don't necessarily know how to manage their emotions, manage their anger, and have more productive conversations with people when they make a mistake. What kind of tools or advice or guidance can you offer to that chef who wants to be better but doesn't necessarily know how?
No, that's a good question. I think that the way that one could be better and don't know how, I think it's taking inventory of their own personality, one, and being able to identify their triggers. So, they can say they're a chef or they're of a group, a restaurant, but just identifying their triggers. What are some of the triggers? Is it, oh my gosh, somebody didn't get something right? But just maybe identifying three or four triggers that really trigger and prompt a unhealthy response to a situation. And I think being able to even find a coach that helps them through problem solving, effective communication, or a therapist, effective communication, and even putting themselves in the shoes of those people that they're interacting with and asking themselves how would they want to be communicated to, and how would they want to be treated. And I know there's so many regulations in the kitchen running a restaurant, and I think that sometimes people think about all those rules and regulations that I think they forget the basic interaction, but the most important interaction is with people. That's what people are serving, but I think it really goes back to how do you want to be treated, but also really understanding the landmines that are planted underneath that anybody can step on, and just thinking about that softness. How do you want to be soft in your delivery? And it takes a lot of introspection and really thinking about yourself and putting yourself in everybody's position that's in the restaurant. And it will take a while. But I think it's being humble enough to say, and going back and apologizing, but it's being humble enough to really sit back and ask yourself, how do you want to respect each person, each job? How do you want it to be communicated? And how would you want to be in that position yourself?
I'm gonna read another clip, another excerpt from that article because it follows up nicely with what you just said. Patrick Mulvaney, owner in chief of Mulvaney's B&L in Sacramento, says the changes have to start at the top of each restaurant. By modeling the right behavior for my managers, they will model it for the staff, which improves not only morale up and down the line, but also responsiveness, which improves performance and retention. Mulvaney believes restaurant owners need to create a space in which workers feel comfortable talking about their mental health. How does a chef or restaurant owner create such a space?
Well, I think that it begins with, it could be doing something at the beginning of the day and then even at the end of the day. I know everybody's ready to wrap up, but you know, being able to honor the people at the beginning of each day and at the end of the day. And when you can honor people and thanking them and saying, hey, we wouldn't be here or we wouldn't be doing this if you weren't here and if you didn't contribute, gratitude goes a long way. That's why people have gratitude journals, gratitude jars. Gratitude is big. And to honor them and hold a space for people to be able to communicate what they're going through and they're still showing up for work is really big because that means that you care. Even if it's for 5 or 10 minutes, just acknowledging everybody and letting them know that the team would not be running the way it is if one person was absent. And so I think it's really gratitude, but also creating a space for communication to share a story. It could be one sentence or one word of how somebody feels. And they're putting their piece there. They're not just coming and saying, I have to show up for work, but their whole self is being represented in that moment. I think that's really important, even if it's for 5 minutes, and then doing at the end of the day. And hopefully being able to include everybody that has been working in that space the whole day, one way or another, they're being honored, which I think is really important. And that's the basic that you can do. Um, I think also you can do, finding a way to have some type of wellness and maybe in the shifts or people like taking a break, but just being able to tap into some type of breathing or meditation. Because if you're constantly in survival mode and dealing with people, right, then that means you're on a a constant, your cortisol is constantly on a high. So when do they have an opportunity for that to come down for even 5 minutes? If they have to leave work, go home, take care of their kids and their responsibilities, then they're always in survival mode. So how can my thing is allowing a restaurant the opportunity for their workers just to come down, even if it's for 5 minutes on their break, or just and so they can come back and they can be rejuvenated.
I like the idea of the that gratitude practice because I think that's something is easy to get started and will not take much time because
Mhm.
I understand that the commercial kitchen, especially for dinner service, it's a really high pressure environment, time sensitive. Everything is now, which uh, what we're not suggesting, what we're saying explicitly is to preserve the mental health of everybody who's involved in delivering that service. We're going to have to slow things down a bit, at least for a few minutes. And I think that gratitude practice is something that is easy enough to implement and be able to do so without taking very much time. That could just be a block of 5 minutes where we're just going to acknowledge whoever did something great. We're going to acknowledge each other and the support that we're going to provide to each other and the grace that we're going to give each other and just kind of something along those lines. Do you can you offer any kind of structure for a gratitude process for a chef or a restaurant owner who likes the idea of this but just doesn't know how exactly to implement something like this?
Yeah, so what somebody can do, they can get a gratitude jar and they can start like just write throughout their day. People can like put a sticky note in the gratitude jar and then somebody can take something out. Or what somebody can do is, um, you can do your gratitude jar and put something in there and pull it out, or you can write something about a coworker, you know, and they can give it to a coworker. It just depends on kind of the gratitude jar is really important. I think that you can always put in and then take out. You can have some kind words, or you can share. So it's the circle. It could be in a circle time or whatever, and the person next to you shares something might share something about you of, oh, thank you for cleaning the table, or thank you for greeting me in the morning. It's small, and so acknowledgement and gratitude, actually just purely acknowledging another person, will take down, if somebody's angry, it will release that emotion of anger. Like, acknowledgement will take away resentment and anger in a heartbeat. So a lot of those emotions, heavy or negative emotions, will come down and disappear if you start acknowledging the other people that you're working with or in your environment. So it can just simply be like, thank you for smiling at me this morning. And so you can put it in the jar, or you can just in circle time really pick a person in the circle to acknowledge that other person. It could be something that small, it doesn't have to be big.
So we've thus far been talking about what management and ownership can do to facilitate a better environment, a better mental health environment. What about the individual, the employee? What can someone do who finds themselves in one of these toxic workplaces and they don't know what to do? They didn't have a drug problem when they got there, but this stuff that's getting passed around, it's starting to make sense to them why they might want to try it. And what guidance can you offer for somebody who's in such an environment?
Well, I guess the easy option would be to leave the location, leave the environment, right? But I know that people have bills to pay. Um, Toxicity is toxicity, right? So that's poison. Um, so I think it's really understanding that if you're in a toxic environment, one way or another, the poison will eventually get to you. Um, it just might be different than other people. So my thing is really analyzing and really sitting back and asking yourself what's more important. Um, and so maybe it is leaving that environment and going to seek another environment, and that may pay less, but you still have your sanity and your wellness, and you still, you're not addicted to a substance. So I think that's really important of just kind of stepping back. But something you can do if you have to stay in that space is tending to your wellness more so than before. It might be doing breathing or doing yoga, just finding something that is going to cleanse your body of the toxicity that you're interacting with day in, day out. But you would probably have to eventually leave that environment because it's toxic, because you may hook up and do those drugs, and then you're hooked on drugs, and then you're now having to figure out how to become sober. And being on drugs is not a it's not cool.
Yeah, I I don't have any personal experience with it, uh, direct experience other than family members and friends back, back in the crack era. You couldn't. Everybody had somebody who it was just such a pervasive problem. It was like the opioid crisis now. It's hard to not know anybody who doesn't have, uh, or know somebody who knows somebody. Like you couldn't be more than a couple of degrees removed from someone with a drug problem. But what I would say is that for people who need the money, you're working in this restaurant or wherever it is you're working because you need the money. Just understand that if you end up developing a drug addiction or an alcohol addiction, uh, your money's not going to be going where you'd intended it to go anyway. So
Right.
just, you know, something to keep in mind. Um, what was there anything in the article that I didn't cover that you wanted to discuss?
I no, I think it was just I think for me it was just interesting to read about just um the non-tip versus tip. I think it's just interesting that the ones that are tipped, um, just the level of insomnia and depression. I think that this industry, wellness is should be really important, should be at the forefront. If you're gonna work in this environment, I think it's more important as a mental health therapist and somebody who's a advocate for wellness. I think it's finding a way to really put wellness into your day to day, even if it's 5 minutes and even if it's just simple breathing. Because if you're constantly in survival mode and you're constantly, pushing your body mentally and physically to the limit. And so that'd be one thing that I would want people to do is just simply breathe. Like just simply inhale through your nose and exhale out through your nose, and just giving your body the opportunity to be out of fight, flight, or freeze, and just be in rest and digest. And just notice and witness how that feels. Because you're constantly moving, you're constantly interacting. There's a lot of things that people are navigating in this industry, and I think wellness is really important for you guys.
So I want to apologize for the construction noise that you hear outside. There's nothing I can do about it. Um, what I would encourage chefs to do is like the when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. I hope that's not what this looks like, but uh, a cooking show. A cooking show is a leadership platform. So if you are a chef an experienced chef, you've been around, you've seen the industry, and you want to leave the industry better than it was when you came into it, a cooking show is an excellent platform for you to affect that change by discussing the issues like you see us doing here, by leading the dialogue on these issues, by teaching other chefs, that there's a better way. Not just the junior chefs who are coming into the industry, but your peers. Just host a show where you guys have real conversations about what's working and what's not working in your restaurant, and how you can create a better environment to facilitate better outcomes for your staff. Because I know that retention is a real finding good employees and retaining them is a huge problem. Well, if let's work on this issue of chewing people up and having them end up addicted to drugs and alcohol. Maybe if we work on that in work environment so that we're not driving folks to drink or to consume drugs, then you have less churn and you have better employees overall. Like you just we this article was really eye opening for me. I of course neither Marsha nor I. Hang on a second, we got a fire truck going by. Yeah, neither Marsha nor I pretend to have all the answers here. We are not restaurant industry professionals, hospitality professionals, but we we do care. Marsha is a licensed mental health professional. She's a licensed therapist. I work with chefs to create cooking shows, so we both have a vested interest in helping address this problem. And yeah, a cooking show, from my perspective, is a platform that a chef can use to affect some change. And along those lines, I'd like to know what we can do as consumers. So in the comments, please let us know what as consumers can we do to facilitate a better working environment, because this is again the hospitality industry. All of this stress that people are under here is as a result of providing service to us as the consumer. Whereas the consumer, I would like to know, what can I do to lower the stress levels in your workplace? I don't want to be a part of driving people to drinking and drugs. What can we do? How can we be better customers so that people have a better workplace? And again, your cooking show is a way that you can provide that information, not by preaching, but teaching. You're just educating. You're inviting people with a cooking show. Really, what you're doing is inviting people into your kitchen to have a conversation and enjoy a great meal. And through the course of preparing that meal and that conversation that you're having, you can deliver all kinds of education without beating people over the head with it. So I would say, like, something that I learned is that how much bread waste there is in restaurants. People ask for the bread basket and they, one piece of bread, or they don't even do that. And that bread gets tossed. That's just, so just educating the consumer about ways that we can be better stewards of the environment, better customers to create a better workplace for the hospitality staff. A cooking show is just a platform where you can deliver so much education to make the industry better than it was when you came into it, and just create a better environment for everyone. So to the experienced chefs, I would encourage you to really think about hosting your own show and using that as a tool for affecting change. Um, Thank you for joining us today. You got anything else you wanna tell the folks, Marsha?
Um, I I would love to learn. I mean, I think the way what Lindsay's saying for consumers, I would love to know what we can do. Like I said at the beginning, it was really eye-opening for me, and I felt there was this heaviness as I was reading the article that I just was like, how can I help? What can I do to, make that industry a little bit better, and I would just want to know what's the feedback and see how we can help you guys. Yeah.
Yeah. So again, thank you everyone for joining us. Uh, be sure to check out Marsha's channel at Marsha. What is it? Marsha.
Marsha listens. Chicka chicka choo. Yep.
Marsha listens on YouTube. You definitely want to subscribe. She's teaching all kinds of wellness practices that, whether you're in the restaurant industry or not, but you may learn something there that you want to incorporate into your restaurant operations, and that's what Marsha's hosting that channel for. So again, thank you for joining us, and we will see you in the next video.